What happens when law, business, and life collide? Each week on Lead Counsel, your host Tom Tona will take a deep dive into topics related to the law, the business of law, and life. There will be insightful discussions with industry insiders, experts, and thought leaders making significant contributions and meaningful differences in their fields of expertise. Tom is the founder and managing attorney at TonaLaw. He has been a practicing attorney since 1994 and the leader of TonaLaw since it opened in 2001. The goal of this podcast is to provide you with free information on law and the business of law, and to give you actionable tools related to each of these areas. Now, here's Tom.
Welcome, everybody, to the Lead Counsel podcast. It's your host, Tom Tona. I'm here with Juliet, my marketing person, my good friend, and my many times co-host. What's up, Jules?
Hello, everybody.
How we doing?
Doing well.
Took a couple of days in between. We're back and rolling in the saddle.
Yup. I hope you feel well rested because we got a lot to talk about.
Today's episode is going to be about specifically the DISC test, which is a personality test. It's a tool that we use to help us establish communication styles and management styles on an individual basis. So even though we have a team of 34 people we're at right now, we find that the DISC is such a useful tool in helping us figuring out the best way to communicate with people and also what type of management styles they like. Some people like hands-on, some people like hands-off. So we really try to take a tailored approach. So I'm excited to dig into the DISC itself. I know some people use the Colby test and there's other hiring tests and tools that you can use. I am super fond of the DISC test because I've worked with it for over 10 years now. And pretty much everybody that's part of the organization has taken it, myself included. I've taken it twice because sometimes the DISC will change situationally, but for the most part, it stays steady. And it's a super effective tool. And you've been amazed by it, which is why you were the one who said, we got to do an episode on the DISC. So I'm excited to roll into it.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of the DISC test. I think that it really helps people understand their personality type and helps them make better career choices based off of their personality types. Like it helped me a lot figure out what I actually want to do and what my personality aligns with career-wise.
So it actually helps in your personal life, right? So if you know you're a specific DISC profile and what your specific dominant traits are. So the DISC is a assessment test that we use in hiring, developing, onboarding, training, management style, etc. And it really helps us establish communication styles and management styles that are more tailored individually, even though we're an organization that's growing and we're at 34 people right now. So the DISC will be useful both in a professional setting and in a personal setting. Throughout the episode, I'll use myself and your DISC and a couple of other DISCs of people that we work with to highlight differences in communication styles, different types of management styles we apply to those communication styles, just to understand why it's been so effective for us. Let's talk about understanding what the DISC does. There's 4 dimensions of behavior that are measured in the DISC assessment. And so the D stands for dominance, I is for influence, steadiness is the S, and then compliance, which is the C, DISC. So dominance, high Ds, which I'm one, are, and you have a higher D.
Yeah,
right?
I have a high D.
So they are the entrepreneurial risk takers. They are driven. They can be seen as assertive. Under extreme stress, they can be seen as somewhat aggressive. And under really extreme stress, you can be like a Tasmanian devil. Like you thrive in chaos as a high D. And then as somebody who's a high D, I know those traits about me. The I stands for influence. Those are people, right? So if you're a high I, like you're what on the I scale?
An 8, like right above an 80. So maybe 81, 82.
Okay. So
on a scale of 100.
Right. So you love people. Right? You're all about rainbows and butterflies. Everything is love and happiness and everything is positive and upbeat. You're like a super optimistic person. You bring a lot of energy to the team. You're invigorated by people. And Lord, you love to talk.
Oh, we know.
Right? So you love to talk so much that in the extreme, you'll have to tailor that and be well aware of the fact that you could be too extreme in your talkativeness, right? So it's useful to know that you're a high I, high D, but it explains so much about your personality. The S that stands for steadiness, those people that have a high S typically are like high S and high C, right?
Mm-hmm.
High S is like stability. They're very empathetic. They want to come in and know their job every day. And they don't like change.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're in a fast-paced environment like we are, we have to understand that when we're communicating with the high S's, we have to do it in such a way that they're not spooked by the change,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because change feels bad to certain personalities. High D's, on the other hand, like myself, I'm good with chaos. I'm good with frequent change. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm talking micro changes of 100 a day, I'm fine with. It doesn't faze me. And then the C, which is compliance, is high attention to detail. They like structure. They like systems. They like rules. They believe that everybody should follow the rules. And so all of these different components bring value to an organization. You don't want an organization that's all high D's, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because it'll be just like a bunch of Tasmanian devils running around here with their hair on fire.
It literally, I picture like that scene from SpongeBob where he's running around in his like head and it's like everything's on fire. That would be a place of all D's.
Okay. I don't know that reference because I wasn't a SpongeBob fan. I'm sorry. I am 54.
Everybody out here, if you know what I'm talking about, you'll know it. Oh, I wish we could like insert a picture.
But I get it. So like you never would want an organization with all high D's. And so I'm a high DI. And back in the day when I was practicing on files and I was handling all of the work myself, I was a high DIC, right? And Janira and I used to joke around. Janira is the legal administrator. We used to joke around that I'm a dick. Right. So a high DI in the extreme with a high C is I raised my C, which is the attention to detail, when the stakes were very high. And they always were when I was touching files. So I do look for attorneys that have high attention to detail. Like that's important. Since I've stepped back from the handling of files, it really has been I'm a screaming high DI. And that's because I want to lead in the macro. And I love the culture, the team, and that's where the I comes in, which is I love people, but my D makes sure that I have boundaries with my communication styles and how I communicate. So my D trumps the I. So I'm not like constantly talking, constantly on. As a matter of fact, like with my specific disc, I value concise, short communication well above like just meandering conversations that have no end.
Yeah.
Because those frustrate me. That's just my disc. So I give out my disc to people that work here. I want them to understand how I communicate and how we can communicate the best and optimal for everybody. So let's discuss how the disc is conducted. It's an online test. You get an email link from the person that administers it.
Yep.
And it takes about 15, 20 minutes.
I would say about 20 minutes. And it's very interesting because it's basically this test that asks you the most random questions. Like, out of these questions, you would never think that it could give you a whole report about your personality, but it kind of asks you, like on a scale of 1 to 10, how you feel about certain things. It also asks you to judge yourself. Like, do you find yourself more of like a calm person or a crazy person? Like, not that exact question, but
right. It gives you a lot of A and B scenarios to choose from.
Yep.
And then it establishes what are your more dominant traits. There's also a version of the disc called the disc with motivators that we use with attorneys specifically because it tells you, in addition to the 4 traits, it tells you their motivators. What are they most motivated by? And there are, I think, 6 categories of motivation. Utilitarian. Typically, they're very money motivated. I have a high utilitarian score. I like what money represents, not for material stuff, but it represents a tool. Utilitarian. Money to me is the greatest tool because what I can't do, I can buy in talent. And then it allows me to grow and scale what I want to do. There is 5 other categories, one of them being aesthetic, right? Like some people love aesthetic. What is aesthetic? You want to be in a nice house. You want to be in a nice office and you love the way things look. It's very important to some people. My wife always jokes around. I have a super low aesthetic score. So she doesn't get frustrated when she's like, oh, I want to redecorate a room. And I'm like, I could care less as long as the room is warm in the winter and cold in the summer and keeps water off my head because I'm more utilitarian. So you can see how the disc comes into play, even in my personal life, right? Like my wife is a screaming high I, just like you.
Yep.
And she's talking from the minute she gets up to the minute she goes to sleep. and sometimes after. Right? Now, I love her to death. You know how I've been going to be married 14 years this year. But we have a running joke because now that we have the disc and we can compare it and we can talk about different facets of our personality that might frustrate us otherwise, my wife knows that in my head, my high D, I'm probably not paying attention to a lot of stuff unless it's what I'm focusing on, unless she has told me, okay, we're going to have a conversation now. And here's the beginning, middle, and end of what we need to go over. And I need you to pay attention because it's important because of X, Y, Z. Not that I'm a poor communicator. It's just that she knows my brain as a leader never shuts off. I'm constantly in my head tuning and tweaking the business, working on the business in my brain. I always call it that broken brain thing. So us having these tools, the discs, allows us to understand each other. And that's why it's so great in the business setting, because it allows me to understand people, whereas you might have rushed to judgment in the past just because people are different from you. And, I'm older now, so I don't rush to judgment. I seek to understand. I seek to understand what motivates people, why people behave certain ways, why they do what they do. The disc tells us a good foundation to a lot of that stuff. So I'm a big fan of it. I would never bring on anybody that doesn't take it. Yeah. It's kind of like part of the package of coming here. But you see it, like, tell the story about how it impacted your life. So for me, it's funny because I would love to take the disc with the motivation part because I feel like I would be very similar to you where I feel like I would come up a high utilitarian, right? Yeah, whatever. Utilitarian score. Yeah, you're very money motivated. We've established 100%. That. So when choosing a career when I was in college, I was like, all right, what's going to allow me to focus on things I like, but still make a ton of money. And in my head, becoming a lawyer aligned most with those things. So, I told the story of how I got started here, but after working here and taking the disc test, I used to come in every day and you would be like, have you looked at your disc? Are you sure you want to be a lawyer? Because just check your personality type and make sure that it's actually what you want to do, because your personality typically doesn't, not that they don't do well as lawyers, but typically don't enjoy the law work or the work that goes in behind becoming a lawyer. I think there are a lot of facets to it. So if you're a high I, there are. And you just got to know how high, right? You're an 85 or something on the I scale. So my questions 80. To you were, you're an 80, right? Yeah. So, okay. My questions to you are you going to be good sitting in a law library for about 12 hours at a clip for 3 years of your life with very little interaction? That was my experience in law school. I didn't spend time talking to people. I had to study 12 hours a day because I was like, I'm taking the bar exam once and only once. And if I fail, I'll do something else, but I'm not taking it again. And I kind of had a burn the boats mentality, which high Ds usually do. We burn the boats. There's one course of action and that's it. So I scored very high on the bar exam, by the way, because I took that approach. But, as we started to drill down more and more, high I's don't like conflict, right? You hate conflict. I've seen you with conflict and how much you hate it, right? You like everything to be smooth. You want to use diplomacy because you're a high I. You love people. So I was like, well, if you're going to go to law school, figure out what area of law is going to best fit with your disc and should not be litigation oriented if you don't like conflict. Yes. So the funny part of it was, as we started to talk about it, my recollection is, I was like, have you thought about marketing? Have you thought about doing marketing and sales? And you were like, I have not. And I was like, would you be open to it? And then I kind of took a little deep dive and I eventually came to the realization that law school most likely would not be for me. I have no doubt in my mind that I would have done extremely well because I do have that high D as well. So at the same time, yes, I am a very high I, but I also have that ambition and that drive behind me. So high Ds are very competitive also. They love competition. I love to win. Yeah, they love to win. So that does lend itself, but you can also find little niches where it could work, but you might be happier doing something else. It might be more organic. I hate to use that word, but it might be a more organic fit. I can't imagine you not doing marketing after seeing you doing it for a year. You have literally, you've blossomed into this marketing beast, really talented, super accomplished. And I'm kind of constantly amazed at the stuff you're doing. And I never say that. You know me.
I know. I'm like shocked right now.
I wouldn't say it if it wasn't true.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of that is your disc because you are money motivated.
Yep.
And you know that if you succeed in that role at what you love doing, which you do love it, you know the money's going to come. You finally got to that point where you've been patient enough to understand the money's going to come.
Yeah. Yeah. And of course, like there were still aspects of the law field that I like, and I do love to help people, but I realized that I could do more for not only myself, but in terms of helping people by marketing law firms and marketing for specifically, I mean, this firm specifically also.
So for me, my highest, best use of my disc and what my strongest assessments were, my strongest attributes were, was the entrepreneurial side of running a law firm, right? I could have chosen the trial route because I was trying cases at the time and the lawyering route, but I chose an expression of my attributes of the leadership role. It's what I loved to do.
Yeah.
So let's talk about what the disc assessment report looks like, right? So when you get the report, it gives you an introduction, right? And it talks about where opportunity meets talent. So the opportunity lies in taking somebody's 2 dominant or 3 dominant traits and then figuring out what role best fits those traits, right? Like, so you might fit in other roles, but because of your disc, you're a natural in the role you're at. Right person, right seat is key to a great company, right? So every person being in the right role is very important. So I have a report in front of me and I'm going to work off of it's mine. And this is the second one I took when I was pure leadership. So my disc changed a little bit and I'm a screaming high DI, like 100 on the disc scale.
You're a 100 on the D?
And an 88 on the I.
You're a higher I than I am.
But that's my natural style. So that's the other thing. So they give you a natural style and an adapted style, right? So the natural style is how you are in everyday life. Adapted style is typically how you are at your current position or your last job if you're in a hiring scenario. That's how you'll perform at work. What you want to see on the disc when you're looking between natural style and adapted style is no change. Now, I've seen people's discs that are high performers.
Yeah.
Where there's a difference in their adaptive style and their natural style. And the way it's been explained to me, because again, I'm not expert in this, I'm just fascinated by this test and I've studied it a lot, is that when they are different, when the natural style and the adaptive style are different, that's a person that's typically under stress or in conflict because they're changing who they really are.
Yeah, of course.
And typically we use this, and I've been interviewing now for 23 years. I've been interviewing people to hire, and we've been using the disc for probably 12 of those years as one tool. It's one tool to help us better understand people. And we talk about it during the interview process and why it's important. It helps us understand how people want to be communicated with.
Yep.
So somebody like you is going to communicate different than me. You know my communication style, right? It's way shorter time frame. So it's kind of be brief, be bright, be gone.
Yep.
And I hate to say it that way, but that is my personality because in my head, I'm making probably 100 different micro decisions in a day, maybe more.
Yeah. And when we started working closely together, we both really had some, I don't want to say friction because we always worked well together, but we definitely had to sit down in the beginning with our disc tests and be like, okay, this is how we need to fix our communication styles or like things I needed to change. Like now I know when I come in here for a meeting, I need to have bullet points and I need to be like, okay, we're talking about these 3 things. This is the most important, what we need to get done. And then I'll be out of your hair. So it's like,
but then there's also times where I know you need to talk, right? And I say, okay, let me set aside 45 minutes and we'll just talk because you need that processing, right?
Yes.
So for me, yeah, you hit it right on the head in terms of, because I have so many meetings and so many people that want to speak with me. I typically am like, look, send me an agenda, give me the bullet points, start with the end first. And then if I need more data, I'll ask for it. But that's just the way I process. None of these are good or bad, by the way.
It just depends on the person.
It just depends on the person. And it's just, there are different strengths with different discs. Like there are SCs that work here that I wouldn't put them in any other role than the role they're in because they're client facing, they're empathetic. They need to show the clients that empathy. Clients need empathy and understanding. They like the same structural position day in, day out. They need that. They want that. And that's what they get from their role. But they wouldn't be happy with constant changing chaos like marketing.
Yeah, no.
The marketing silo that you're handling right now is constant chaos because we have so many different channels of marketing, right? You're handling all of it like a champ, and you're quite honestly, I don't know how you do it half the time, honestly. So the DISC report goes through not only the different general characteristics where it talks about the 4 different attributes, and then it talks about the value to the organization, right? So it'll talk about what your strongest skills are and how that is valuable to an organization. So for instance, like my DISC is forward-looking and future-oriented. That's all I do is plan and adjust. I'm always forward-looking. I feel like my job is to predict trends and see trends and do constant risk opportunity analysis. I am creative in my approach to problem solving, ability to change gears fast and often, etc. But there's also downsides to my DISC, which it talks about as well. It talks about how to communicate. And that's a very important function, is how to communicate with specific DISCs. So like if I looked at yours, it would be different from mine. One of the things that I know is true about me says you got to be isolated from interruptions. I can't have any interruptions when I'm focusing on something. And it makes me nuts when I do, so much so that we bought these little devices for every office in the office and every cubicle in the office that is like a red, yellow, green light setup to let people know if somebody's in deep focus mode where they're working on a project that requires deep focus. I like stuff in writing because it gives me accountability. It gives me tracking and implementation tools. I like systems that will then be followed because that allows for scaling. Ways not to communicate with somebody with my DISC is rambling on, wasting time, no point, right? So, these different things, and then it gives you communication tips. So I'll talk about like for somebody who is a person who's ambitious, forceful, decisive, strong-willed, independent, goal-oriented. If you have a high D, that's you, right? Even though you're high I. So this also would apply to you where be clear, specific, to the point, stick to the business. But again, because you're a high I, that's your most dominant trait, right? So you are magnetic, enthusiastic, friendly, demonstrative. You need a warm and friendly environment. Yeah. I have to temper my
harsh and cold.
Straight to the point. You got to cut that. I'm not harsh and cold. Actually, don't cut that. I'll tell you why. Okay. What you just said, harsh and cold, that's a high I response to me saying, I'm just matter of fact talking about facts and data, right? Yeah. Like eyes are touchy-feely. Yeah. Eyes are, I call it rainbows and unicorns, right? So you are magnetic. People love you. People love high I's, by the way. They just love them. There's not one person who meets a high I and isn't like, I just met the best person ever. And that was my impression of everybody that meets you, right? You're enthusiastic, you're friendly, you're demonstrative, you're emotional. You need warm and friendly environment. You don't want a lot of details. You don't want to put them in writing. No. You just like to talk. And you think everybody's going to remember everything. Yeah. Or it's not that important. The facts are the facts, but they're not that important, right? Why are you laughing?
Because it's true. Like at the same time, I have that high I and the D. So like I will talk business, but I'll have a full conversation in between the business.
And not write any of it down and think I'm going to remember all of it.
I know. So then we have moments where we're like, didn't we say that? And I'm like,
Send me an email, Jules. Send me an email about all of it, right? That is a management tool that I have to use with higher I's. Is either I'm sending a confirming email or you're sending a confirming email because I need it in writing. So if we're going to work productively together in a way where we have a great working relationship, it relies on great communication. And we have figured out tools that help us do that using our discs. The other thing you want is feeling questions. You want to know opinions and comments, and you want to know feeling stuff. And that stuff makes me nuts. I know. But I'll do it because I know you need that, right? I'm not being patronizing. I'm being individualistic in meeting your communication needs.
Yeah. Like before I ever make like a big decision, I'm like, okay, but what's everybody else's opinion on it? And for you, you make so many decisions all day, every day that you're like, why do you need my opinion? Just make the decision. And I'm like, okay, but let's meet halfway.
Right. Give me a little something to work with, right? And the funny thing is, so on the personal side, like your disc is like my wife's disc. Right?
Yeah, we are very similar.
My wife is a screaming high IS. So my wife likes stability.
Yep.
She likes to know what she's doing, and she is the most empathic person you have ever met. And I'll give you an example of that. I'll give you an example of how the disc works in a second between me and my wife, but she's a screaming high, right? So I know that when I walk in the door, it doesn't matter what stress I've had from the day, she needs to talk. I am exactly the opposite. Like I walk in and I'm like, I would love to go sit in a sauna right now somewhere and cook for about a half an hour and get all the toxins out and not talk to anybody. But, you know, you want to be in a happy marriage. You want to have a happy wife, happy life. So you make those adjustments because it is important. It definitely is important. One of the other useful aspects of the disc is it gives you perceptions, how you perceive yourself, how others will perceive you in a normal, everyday, moderate stress level, and then how under extreme stress or fatigue, how you'll be perceived. And here's the ugly part of my disc, right? So, you know, how I see myself as assertive, confident, a winner, positive, competitive, pioneering, because I'm fearless and I'll implement anything that I know one of my coaches has told me is a tried and true method. I don't even have to question it. If I like it, I move, I act. Under moderate pressure, tension, stress, or fatigue, other people may see me as demanding, egotistical, nervy, or aggressive. I don't love that, but it's true. Yeah. Right? And then under extreme pressure, stress, or fatigue, others may see me as abrasive, arbitrary, controlling, or opinionated. You know, you used the word harsh before, the way I communicate. And I was like, oh, cut that out. But then I was like, don't, because your perception of it as a high I could be that. Yeah. Right?
And that's under like extreme stress.
You don't have to explain it. It's true. Look, there's no good or bad. It just is what it is.
Yeah.
If I was to read yours or my wife's.
Right now.
Go ahead, read yours under, read your self-perception.
My self-perception. I tend to see myself as enthusiastic, which 100%. I feel like anything
You're like
I do.
a puppy dog with a wagging tail all the time. Everything excites you.
Outgoing, inspiring, optimistic. You even said it yourself, very optimistic.
Yeah.
Persuasive. I like to think I'm persuasive.
No, you are.
Yeah. And then others' perception of me could be very self-promoting, which I can see that, honestly. Overly optimistic, which I've had people tell me that I kind of am sometimes. And unrealistic. I mean, depends on how you look at it. And then under extreme pressure, stress, or fatigue, people may see me as a poor listener, which I can definitely attest to. Like when I'm under stress, like I can't even give people the time of day and I'm just like tunnel vision. A self-promoter, which that was under both, honestly. So I guess people just think that I talk about myself all the time. But, you know, working, I've definitely had to adjust it when working.
Listen, you're awesome. Don't worry about it. You apologizing for everything.
I'm like, crap.
Look, the bottom line is when we get these tests, whoever it is, the applicant, whoever it is, they get a copy of it. And I always ask, what do you think? Because I know what I think after having seen it in motion for 12 years over hundreds and hundreds of candidates. It's always fascinating to me because most of the time, almost every time, people are like, that thing's unbelievably accurate. Yeah. And a lot smaller percentage of the time, people will say, you know, I don't know. I didn't really agree with this. And I showed it to my spouse and they said, yeah, that's you. Yeah. You know, I'm like, well, your spouse does know you're the best, you know, because people might not like to see that part of themselves, how other people might see them under extreme stress. Yeah. But it just is what it is. Everybody's got different sides to their personality. Yeah. It doesn't there is no wrong or right profile, right? Everybody's got a profile. There is no wrong or right version of. Thank you for listening to the Lead Counsel podcast. Make sure that you come back next week to listen to part 2 of our conversation on the DISC assessment and why DISC testing or some type of testing during the recruiting process is crucial.